Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, I want to recognize a significant accomplishment in the podcasting world. As some of our longtime listeners may know, in addition to this podcast about sailing, we do another podcast about business and entrepreneurship called The Unconventional Path. We started The Unconventional Path back in September of 2018 when we were both on the business school faculty at Clarkson University. We have released 176 episodes of The Unconventional Path. We started this sailing podcast in September of 2020, and this is episode 124. Well, if you add 124 plus 176, it equals 300. Mike, we have done 300 podcasts together. That's a lot of talking and a lot of interviews, and hopefully our listeners have received some value from all of those podcasts.
Wow, Bela, I didn't realize this. Good for you for doing the math. And honestly, don't take this the wrong way, but I thought there was no way that when we started this this podcasting kind of hobby that we'd still be doing it 300 episodes later. But I know that I've learned a ton, and we've met a whole bunch of amazingly interesting, smart, and impressive people through all this. And I agree with you. I hope that our listeners have learned something and at least been a little bit entertained, hopefully along the way. So Bela, thanks to you, because I think the listeners know you do all the heavy lifting on this. And thanks to all of our guests over the years, and most importantly, thanks to all our listeners all around the world.
Yeah, agreed, Mike. A big thank you to our listeners. So enough about the past. Let's turn our attention to the present. Today's guest on the podcast is Jeremy Elwell. Several years ago, Jeremy left a six-figure corporate job, bought a sailing school, and started teaching sailing. Now, that's what I call diving into the pool head first.
Yeah, Bela, this is great. And today's kind of a neat blend. You just mentioned our entrepreneurship sailing podcast and our sailing podcast. And today's guest, Jeremy, is a kind of a neat blend of a sailor and an entrepreneur. So I think listeners, you should look out for some hints about maybe how you might want to someday turn your passion for sailing into a profitable and satisfying business. And second, for those curious about sailing schools, I learned a lot with this interview about how sailing schools work, the value they provide. And interestingly, look out for learning about some of the changes that these schools have undergone over the past several years. So I think listeners are going to like this episode.
Yeah, those are all great points, Mike, as usual. Now let's get into my discussion with Jeremy. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, well, great. So Jeremy, you run a sailing school.
I do.
Called Reef Runner Sailing School.
That's correct.
And from what I've been able to learn is you have a location in Maine and you have a location in Florida.
That's correct. Yep. Panama City, Florida, and Friendship, Maine.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the sailing school and sort of how you got into this.
Yeah. So I started sailing. I was in my late 20s. I'm 42 now. So it's probably been a good 12 to 15 years. And just every day was like, I want to sail. I want to sail. I want to sail. And I bought a little boat and I went out and I went sailing on it and loved it and was like, okay, this is my life goal, is I want to cruise the world by sail. But I still had a day job, and that day job kept me busy. And the more I worked, the more money I made, and the more money I made, the harder it was to leave. So I kept trying to figure out, how do I cash in? How do I buy a boat? How do I cruise the world? And I couldn't figure it out. And so I just kept sailing. And one day I got a promotion out to Louisiana, went to Louisiana and joined the yacht club there and started sailing with some guys on bigger boats. And mind you, I'd been on a 17-foot day sailor for a few years at this point. And when I got onto another boat with other people, I realized, I don't know as much as I thought I did. So I started looking for sailing lessons and ways to learn professionally, especially if I had intended to buy a larger boat and set sail across the world, and that was going to be my life. So I found the ASA. And I started taking my sailing lessons with the American Sailing Association and really loved it. I enjoyed the lessons. I enjoyed the books, and I kept progressing through the ranks and eventually got my captain's license and started teaching. And then I was like, I've got to do it. I've got to pull the trigger. I'm going to sell off stocks. I'm going to sell off my 401k. I'm going to sell off everything I own. I'm going to buy the boat and I'm going to go. And I still had cold feet. I couldn't pull the trigger. I thought I'm going to be out of money in 2 years and I'm going to come crawling back to the old job, just begging for my job back. And so I couldn't do it. And I started thinking, okay, I've got the entrepreneurial mindset. What if I bought a business that's on the coast, get some, I was thinking like a bike rental or a kayak rental, maybe get some kids running this while I'm out sailing every day. And I was like, okay, I'm going to work on Florida. I like the Gulf Coast of Florida. That's my home base here. And I was in the process of driving from Lake Charles, Louisiana to New Orleans. And I was scrolling by BizSeller, a business for sale website like that. And I was looking at, here's a kayak rental business. Here's like a hot dog stand business. And then I saw sailing school. I was like, oh man, sailing school. Why didn't I think of that? I was like, could I teach people to sail for a living? And I was like, yeah, totally. I was doing it for fun on the weekends, but could I do it professionally full time? So I called the owner at the time, was Captain Pete, and he operated a reef runner sailing school out of Panama City, Florida. And I said, first question I asked him was, Pete, why are you selling the business? And he said, Jeremy, I'm 275 pounds and I'm 70 years old and I'm tired of being in the Florida heat. And I said, that's a pretty damn good reason, Pete. So I set up a meeting time, signed the NDA, looked at the boats, looked at the numbers, and thought it all looked really doable and manageable. And 2 months later, I owned a business, quit my job, and moved to Florida.
Holy cow. That's quite the story, man. So you jumped in head first.
I did. And so from that day forward, I've been a full-time sailing instructor. The first year we did really good. We doubled business. The second year we got hit by Hurricane Michael in 2018, and that wiped out every boat that I owned. And then to my surprise, I was up and running again within 31 days. I went out and bought a boat 2 weeks later, had it at anchor, cleared all the debris off a boat ramp, and I shuttled people in a dinghy out to the boat to do their courses.
Wow.
And then it's been good business ever since. And then just kind of pulling Maine into that. In 2020, I met my wife, and she was from Maine. And mind you, I'm still gearing up to do this big cruising trip, and now I was going to do it in pieces. And but my ideal boat has always been like a small, robust, super capable, like a Flicka 20 was a dream boat. And you don't find that kind of stuff in Florida. So I can't find any of these Allberg 30s and these Cape Dories and the Flickas and the Dana 24s in the Florida area. So my wife, my girlfriend at the time, she said, have you ever looked in Maine? And I was like, no, Maine's never been even on my radar as a place to sail to. It's been Florida, it's been across the Atlantic, it's been the Caribbean. And so we're dating at the time, and we've been dating for about 4 months. I finally make the trek up to Maine, and lo and behold, there is the haven of all the small, full keel, super durable and super capable boats. So 4 months in, I went to Maine to visit her. We shopped boats and bought a Cape Dory 28. And so from that day forward, it was okay. If I'm going to spend time in Maine with her, then I need to have a boat and be able to work. So that's where we launched the school in Friendship, Maine. And around the same time, it worked out to close down what I was doing in the winters in Key Largo. So then I was, kind of floating all year around to Panama City. But when I was in Maine, I was able to pick up work and do some charters and make still justify being in Maine and make money on the sailboat.
Yeah. Yeah. So your school is affiliated with the American Sailing Association.
It is,
which means you're a certified card-carrying ASA instructor. So what does it take to become an instructor?
Yeah, so actually becoming an instructor isn't overly difficult. If you're going to make money on a boat, the Coast Guard says you have to have a captain's license or that OUPV 6-pack at minimum. And then ASA wants you to have at least 3 years of experience as a sailor before you come and get your 101, 103, 104 teaching certificates. And then they want you to have that 101, 103, 104 to, basically you're getting the class that you're teaching to be an instructor of it. So if you want to teach 101, then you have to have taken 101. And they work with instructors when you do that. And then you sign up for a clinic, basically like a instructor qualification clinic. You go do the course and pass the tests, and you get your 201, 203, 204, 205, 206, whatever it is, whatever levels that you're going to. So basically you get your sailing lessons, and then you go do your instructor qualification clinics.
Got it.
And then I guess the biggest thing is it's you have to be affiliated with a school at some point. So let's say I was just an instructor and wasn't the owner of the school and wasn't an affiliate with them. I can't just be, a guy on a boat teaching sailing
Right.
lessons. So that's
Right.
kind of their way of keeping everybody, honest and under an umbrella of, an umbrella of, I guess, decency or maybe some professionalism attached to it, and it
Yeah.
assures that the students aren't going to show up to some randomness at anchor somewhere.
Right. Right. So let me ask a slight bit of a business question.
Yeah.
So is there like an annual fee that you pay to ASA, or is there a revenue share, or how does that part work?
Sure. Yeah, their fee structure is sometimes a bit challenging, but you pay for your membership as an instructor, and as an affiliate, I pay an affiliate membership fee every year, and then every test that we key in. So you take one-on-one, maybe you take a written test at the end of it, and then we pay for keying that test in, and then we pay a $39 fee for every student, essentially. So there's a few little hidden layers there that we usually eat the cost on. We used to bill the students $39 for their registration fee, and now it's just rolled into it.
Yeah.
Books we buy from ASA, we roll it into it. So that's kind of how, as the affiliate, they are able to bring in their income as well.
Got it.
It seems justifiable, and kind of work in Maine and Florida. We're not listed on their website as a Maine school because we don't pay for the affiliation of the Maine branch at the moment. That's what we're working on changing now that we're here a little bit further. But with that, there is a significant amount of marketing that they do. Most people are going to go to the internet and type in "learn to sail in New Hampshire," and that's ASA is going to be the first place that pops up and shows you all their schools in New Hampshire. Then you get to pick one from there.
Right.
So
Right.
I'd say, a good portion of our business comes from their website. And then now that I've been doing this since 2017, a good portion of my business is word of mouth or my students coming back as repeat customers.
Yeah. 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 So I took 101, was it 102, 104, I guess?
Probably 101, 103, 104.
Yeah,
102
that's
is a
right.
pretty new
101.
course. They just came out. Yeah.
Yeah. I took that 20 years ago, and it was
Nice.
a week long course.
Yep.
On a boat.
Yeah.
So it was pretty intense, and my wife and I took that together.
Nice.
And I had been sailing for 20 years prior to taking the course.
Yeah.
But it still was wonderful.
Yeah.
Right. Because I learned a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know. And
that was my question.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned from that is it's really good to sail with other experienced people, because you learn a bunch of stuff. Like they have a different way of approaching doing something. And you go, oh, wow, that's a lot better than the way I've been doing it for the last 10 years.
That's
So
good.
that's great.
You found value even after so long of sailing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was
I
great
get some
value.
people that, you get a few students here and there that are really just chasing the certification. But when you get somebody like you that was looking for the added value of sailing, it's so great. And it's rewarding as an instructor too. And I've had guys that have been sailing and boating for 60 years get on the boat and go, oh, I thought I knew everything, but what a great way to coil a line, or what a great way to heave to, or just, a finer nuance that I probably learned the hard way over the years.
Right. Right. So what courses do you offer?
I do, let's see. I do 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106. And then we jump into 111's a refresher course. 114's the catamaran course. And I believe that sums up my course load that I teach.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. And do you do, like I said, the course that I took, 101, 103, 104 combined, was like a week long on a boat. There was a captain. It was my wife, myself, and one other student.
Yeah.
You do those types of courses as well?
That was one of my more popular ones in Florida, was the 101, 103, 104 7-day class. And I think there's fewer and fewer schools that still do those week-long classes like that. And I always liked it because I'd usually get people like yourself, husband, wife sign up, couples sign up. And then I usually close the class there. 2 people. I figure if you guys are going to go cruise together, then why have another person in the mix? And then we use smaller boats. So we're on anywhere from a 28 to a 33-foot boat. So if you start adding in a third or a fourth, or sometimes even a 5th person, you run out of room.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It gets crowded. Oh, so that's great. So what's your typical student like?
So that's a good question. we can even talk about the whole demographic shift over the last 7 or 8 years. When I bought the school in 2017, I call them near retirees, right? 50 to 65 years old. You know that when you're done with work, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to buy the boat, you're going to go sailing, or what's even more popular is bareboat chartering. You know that you want to go bareboat charter, and you're progressing towards that lifestyle of cruising the Caribbean or cruising the Bahamas. And that was predominantly all I taught. And then the sailing YouTube channels really started taking off, and that kind of opened the eyes of people closer to my age. You know, your mid 30s, your 40 somethings, and they were sitting there, and you know, they did what they were supposed to. They went to college, they got the good job, they had the family, they had the house, the cars, the dog, and they were miserable. So they said, I'm watching these La Vagabonds and Daloses on YouTube, and I can be doing that. I can work anywhere in the world. Why don't I do that? And so they come take sailing lessons, and they progress towards that. And some of them have actually taken off. They quit their jobs. They work remote. They cruise the world. Some of them have done it. They took 2 years off and go cruise the world, and they come back to their jobs. And some of them end up in the bareboat charter route, where every couple of months they go rent a boat for a week, Greece, Caribbean, Croatia, and go enjoy that sailing lifestyle in little chunks. And now what I'm starting to see is an even younger generation. And I call it the spinoff of van life is sail life, right? So you started 15, 20 years ago with tiny houses, that trickled down into van life, and now it's opening the doors into sail life. So I'm getting these 20 somethings that don't really know where they're going in life. They're, you know, not sure about their career fields or their technical schools. And they say, I'm just going to take some time and, you know, I'll bootstrap it for a little while on a sailboat. And they're doing their own repairs or picking up odd jobs in marinas, and they're living on the boat. And you know, they're just kind of figuring out life. So the whole demographic has shifted. I'd say 50% of my business is probably still the near retirees, and then we're getting some of the young professionals trickled in with the 20 somethings.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. And what's sort of the catamaran versus monohull? What do people want?
I think we're seeing more and more shift into catamaran, and it's all about space and room. You know, you want to get out there with 6 of your friends, and you all want to have your own room. You want a water maker on board. You may want to run the generator and have an air conditioner, and all of those luxuries that we're used to on land. People want that on boats, and I'm not going to knock it. When I'm on a catamaran and I want to turn on the AC, or I want to take a long hot shower, boy, I do love it. But when I'm sitting on my Cape Dory 28 and just crossed a big body of water, I look down my nose at them on their big fancy. But I definitely think we're seeing a big shift in the market, and you know, just kind of studying the bareboat charter market, you're seeing everybody leaning towards catamarans, and the monohulls are kind of going by the wayside. Or what you're seeing with like Jeanneau is you're getting these big 6-cabin boats, and they're 50 feet long, but they're also 15, 16 feet wide. And everybody that I've talked to that have sailed those big monohulls, they don't sail well. You know, they're designed to, in my opinion, you know, designed to compete with that catamaran market. And you know, all the young people that I get are eager to get onto catamarans. Everybody with a family that I get, they're eager to get onto catamarans. So there is a big shift in the industry, and I think what we're starting to see now is even the catamarans themselves are shifting. And I had a good conversation with a friend of mine recently that. And you know, they're the type that they work for about 3 months and they go somewhere and charter a boat. And I think he's doing a month-long surf trip in Puerto Rico right now. But he said that when they started doing the charters in the bareboat charters in 2018, the boats were what you would expect of like your Lagoon 440s and your Balis. And now you look at a 2024 boat, and it's completely different boats. They're better designed, they're better layouts. They're looking back into performance and sailing ability of them again. They're not just big squares that are going through the water. And they're identifying what people like and what people don't like. You know, where do you place the helm station? Where do you put your deck salons? Where do you have your salon pass-throughs? So all that kind of stuff they've learned and they've developed, and the catamarans are just taking that feedback from users and creating something that people love.
Yeah. There's I have a monohull. So,
you
know,
what do you
I've
say
been on some catamarans, and the space is great.
Yeah.
You know,
I tell people when I'm on them, I love them.
Yes. When I'm on them, I love them, but I don't want to pay the slip fee.
Yeah. I tell you, we had a slip every summer for quite a few years, or every winter, for quite a few years in Key Largo, and we paid $23 per foot of boat. So I took my smaller 31 footer down there and parked it for the summer, and I'd see these 55, 60-foot catamarans come in, and I just imagine they're paying $2,000 to $3,000 a month for a slip down there. And was very happy with my small monohull at that time.
So my boat is on Narragansett Bay.
Oh, great.
So in Rhode Island, and I have a 45-foot boat, and I'm paying almost $200 a foot for the season.
Okay, for the entire season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's 10 grand.
Yeah.
Almost.
And, yeah. So if you're looking at 12 months, that's pretty close to $800 a month.
That's really only 6 months. The season is
right. Yeah. You got a short season.
Right. So it's not quite as short as yours in Maine.
Yeah. I push it. I still have a boat in the water.
Yeah. Well, mine came out this week.
Did it?
So, but anyway, yeah, that's it's pretty expensive. So there are a bunch of catamarans at the marina, and they're paying for 2 slips.
Yeah. Yep. We started seeing a shift. I'd say in South Florida, where they're starting to build marinas for catamarans, or to take boats the size of catamarans. And I was in the BVI's 21, maybe 20, and it's literally just a sea of catamarans.
Yeah.
It's like we were we're shopping boats, and we're looking at a little Dufour 335 with a friend, and like they're just cutting the plastic off the sails of Lagoon 65s, Lagoon 60s, and there's a row of 10 brand new boats. And I'm like, I think these are like $1.2 million a piece. And I'm like, we're looking at, $10 to $15 million just on this side of the slip. And it's incredible, like how the BVIs has shifted so much to cater towards that industry.
Yeah. And I can understand it. You want to go on a vacation with 2 other couples? Hey, it's perfect.
Yep. It's
my
easy
my
sailing.
boat
It's
is a
line
big
of
boat,
sight.
but it's still crowded.
Yeah. And if you want to go to the BVIs, you got a good 2,000 miles to get there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. The marina I'm at last summer, a year ago, they got a new travel lift, and the travel lift, the only reason they got it is because it can pick up catamarans.
Oh,
right. Because their old one was too narrow. It wouldn't do it would do a small catamaran, but you don't see a 30-foot catamaran anymore. They're all 45 plus feet. So
I don't even think they make them sub 40.
Yeah, I don't think so. So let me ask you this. What do you take your boats back and forth between Maine and Florida?
We have for the longest time, and just kind of fill you in our life history, up until this year, I kept a boat in Florida and I kept a boat in Maine. So I had a boat wherever I was at. And then in 2022, we sailed our main boat, that Cape Dory 28, across the Atlantic and left it in Ireland, and came back and was like, I don't have a boat to sail on and teach on in Maine. So we bought another one. So I've got a Pearson 10 meter, 33-foot Pearson here in Maine. And then in Florida, I had the Pearson 31. We had a baby on May 28th, and the marina I was in Florida kind of shuffled my boat around into a very unsafe hurricane slip. It was basically put on a lay along with a concrete barrier wall. So I flew down, had it hauled out, and instead of paying it for dry storage, I said, you know what, let me just truck it to Maine. I'll be able to do some work on it. I'll be able to use it there. So I trucked it up to Maine. So right now I've got 2 boats in Maine, 1 boat in Ireland, and we're trying to figure out when do we go back to Florida. Our original plan was, hey, let's go back to Florida October 1st, and I'll kick the school back off. And now with the baby, it's like, I'm having fun with the new family and kind of living a slower pace here in Maine. And so maybe next year we'll kick things off January 1 or wait till spring. But we lost all urgency.
Yeah. It's funny you said you sailed across the Atlantic and left your boat in Ireland. So and a number of episodes ago, I interviewed a father and son that not this summer, but the previous summer, they sailed across the Atlantic for the first time.
Nice.
And they were like planning this for 2 years and really think about it. And then they got there and then they went, oh crap, now what do we do?
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Right? Because coming back, it's long because they keep
Yeah.
their boat in New England. So, you go south first and then you come across the trades and then you got to go
Yeah.
back north. It's like twice as long. And they
Yeah.
ended up shipping their boat back.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And they
So
said that worked out great.
if you
And
have any contact with them, I'd love to get more. I'd love to pick their brain about it, or if they have a company that they used. We don't intend to ship our boat back, but it's after we crossed, we got pregnant and we lost that baby at a Florida hospital, and
oh,
we kind of postponed our sailing, our sailing plans for a year. We got pregnant again. Now we have the new baby, and we plan to go back to that boat in the spring. And I call
yeah,
it slow boat cruising. I think a guy named Lionel wrote a book called
that's right.
Slow Boat Cruising
That's
in the
right. I read
Bahamas.
that
So
book.
yeah, not a bad book. And so that gave me the idea of I don't have to go cruise the world all in one big full foul swoop 5 year, And so I was like, let's do it in chunks. So we
Yep.
sailed Ireland, and we'll come back in the spring, hopefully spring of 25, make our way up the west coast to Scotland, and then maybe come back to work in the summer, and then late summer, early fall, go cruise up the west coast of Scotland, and just do it in 3-4 week chunks here and there, and we'll probably haul the boat out for another winter, and then 2026 we'd like to come back and do the Orkney Islands, Shetland Islands, maybe do the Faroe Islands if we can get that far, and then call it a spring, come back to work in the summer and do it all over again. And we'd
Yeah.
like to cross the North Sea after that, get to Norway, come down that Norwegian coastline, double back across to England. And so that's our 5-year plan with that boat.
Very nice. Yeah. Lionel's been on the podcast. He was
Has he
one of
really?
my early guests. Yeah. I
That's
don't know.
awesome.
I'd have to look up which number, but yeah, early on he was on the podcast.
That's great.
So that's great. I mean, that this is the interesting thing. There's so many every place you go is interesting from a sailing perspective.
Yeah.
Right. And Florida couldn't be any more different from Maine. And, Maine is to the coast of Spain, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're all different, but they all have commonalities, but at the same time, they have challenges or I shouldn't say new learning opportunities, I guess
Yeah,
is
there you
maybe
go.
a better way of putting it. Right. That's great. That sounds like a wonderful kind of plan you've laid out for yourself there.
Thanks. Yeah, we're excited. And the little guy's 5 months old now. So he'll be right around a year when we get back out there. And, we're on a small boat, so it'll be easy to contain him. And he'll have plenty of practice before then, just sailing out here in Maine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So I want to get back to the sailing school for a second. So what, if I look at Florida or I look at Maine and I get on the ASA website, there's a bunch of sailing schools.
Yeah.
So what makes yours, why do I want to come with Captain Jeremy for a week?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I usually tell people like how to sift through, find an instructor that works with you. And I think what sets us apart is I keep class sizes small. I teach 99% of the classes myself, so I have a vested interest in your learning. And it's I guess we're cruisers teaching cruisers is a great way of putting it. We're not a paid captain that's just trying to make a living, trying to make some money, or, no offense to anybody, but a lot of the sailing instructors are retired and they're looking for something to do on the side. And I think the other aspect that has set me ahead as an instructor is I still remember what it was like to be a new sailor. I remember getting instructors that were these 75, 80-year-old guys that have been sailing for 60 years and they've forgotten more than, they can teach you. And so when you get a new sailor that's struggling on just keeping a straight line, I remember those days. I remember getting distracted and all of a sudden the sails are left and I go, oh, what happened? Did the wind shift? I'm like, oh no, I'm just pointing the wrong way.
Right.
And then, I keep things fun. And I'm out there doing something that I love and I want to share that to other people. And it's fun to see people with this dream and this passion. And sometimes they bring a spouse or a partner that doesn't share that dream or that passion. But when they leave, they almost always have that aspiration. And I was texting with a student from 3, 4, 5 years ago today. He's in the BVI's right now, wrapping up a 2-week trip. And he said, oh, it was great. We had some heavy weather. The experiences I had with you on the boat set this all in motion. You made my wife at ease. We're comfortable enough to take our daughter. And when they started doing this, she was 3 or 4, and now she's 8 or 9. But it's incredible to get feedback like that. And I think just, if I had to put my finger on one thing, I'd say it's I remember what it was like to be a new sailor.
Yeah, very good. Well said. Well said. And certainly your enthusiasm for all of this comes through. Right?
Oh, thank you.
Right? So that's really very apparent in our
Good.
conversation. So I'm going to start wrapping this up. We've been chatting for a
Sure.
while now. So I have last two questions.
Right.
So what advice do you have for someone listening to this that, maybe hasn't sailed at all, or they've, sailed their sunfish on a small lake and they're aspiring to be a better, more experienced sailor? What's your advice to them?
Yep. I say, don't hesitate to find the ASA, find a school to take sailing lessons. But you've got to just jump out and do it. You can sit there and hoe and hum, and you can search the internet, and you can find anything that you want the internet to tell you. If you want it to tell you not to go, you'll find plenty of people telling you not to go. You want people to tell you to go, you'll find plenty of people telling you to go. But if your aspiration is to buy a boat, cruise the Caribbean, I say, don't go buy your Catalina 22 and practice for 2 years. Go buy, a Catalina 36 and practice. And then when you're ready to leave, set sail. You can pick and choose your weather windows, and you can find those moments to sail. If you intend to single hand sail, then maybe don't go buy the 45 footer like you have, because that could be a challenge. Don't be afraid to do something with less. And one of the other big pieces of advice that I give to students that are in the market to buy a boat and set off is start with a bump around boat. If you've got a budget of $500,000 to go buy a really nice boat, start with something that's a little less, maybe in the $40,000 or $50,000 range, because you're going to ding it off the dock a few times. You're going to scuff it up. You're probably going to run aground here and there. And when you do that on your brand new $500,000 fancy boat, you're going to be pretty darn disappointed. But you buy your bump around boat, you have a chance to bump it around a little bit. You're going to learn what you like. You're going to learn what you don't like. And then you can use that knowledge towards your actual boat that you go cruising. But big thing, don't be afraid to go, and don't be afraid to do it. And something great about the sailing community is we're all willing to help. I don't know how many times I've been on the dock at midnight trying to get some maintenance done, and somebody knocks on the boat and says, "Hey, do you need a hand?" And normally I'm the type to say no, but at those moments I go, "I do." And they'll get down there greasy and bloody and cussing with me, and we get the job done. And you don't find that in very many walks of life.
No, you don't. That's been a recurring topic on this podcast. And where I'm always amazed at people's willingness to help each other. And I've often said, if the rest of the world was like that, the world would be a better place.
Very well put.
Yeah. So that was a great summary on advice to aspiring sailors and cruisers. So here's my last question. So let's say someone says, "Gee, I want to be like Jeremy. I want to maybe not own my own school, but let's say my next step is I want to be an instructor."
Yeah.
I've been sailing for 5 or 10 years. I got a keel boat, so I sort of, I've been doing coastal cruising. What would your advice to them be?
Yeah, I'd say, where do you want to sail? If you want to sail the Bahamas, BVI's, Florida, Maine, pick your location and then start reaching out to those schools. If you find, let's say you wanted to come sail in Maine and you find Reef Runner Sailing in Friendship, Maine, and you want to come be an instructor for me, I would say, great. I am actually looking for instructors. I'm spending more time with my baby and I'm spending less time on the water. You need to have your captain's license or your 6-pack OUPV at minimum. And then you need to have your instructor certifications, and I can send them down that road on how to do it. I always recommend Sea School for getting your 6-pack license. I think their logo or their motto is, we hold your hand until your license is in it. And they very much do. So I love them. And then the ASA is super easy to contact. Find an IQC clinic in the area that you want to go to, sign up, and then go get your certifications. So you can do all of that before you even find a school to make yourself more desirable as an instructor. You can say, "Hey, I'm already ready. I need a school to attach myself to." And the ASA is, and honestly, you can go get your ASA instructor certifications without having that Coast Guard qualification either. You can do them all at the same time. The only thing is you're probably going to need that Coast Guard qualification to teach, because now you're making money on the boat if you're doing things by the up and up.
Yeah.
But
so
yeah, it's
calibrate me if I don't have any of those, let's say, right? And is that a 1-year process? Is it a 2-year process?
It's not even that. Let's say most instructors want to teach 101, 103, 104. I think that's the core curriculum of the ASA. If you want to teach those, find an IQC clinic, and it's all listed on the ASA website with the dates, where they're at. Sign up for it. They're going to say, do you have your 101, 103, 104 already? And if you say no, then you're going to get that at the same time as you're getting your 201, 203, 204, which is the instructor certification. And then they're going to say, are you attached to a school yet? You're going to say no. They're going to be like, all right, well, come get all your certifications. You're going to leave there with 101, 103, 104, 201, 203, 204, and then you're going to go find your school to attach yourself to. That's a week, maybe 2 weeks worth of lessons. If you break it up into different courses, I paired all of mine together. I think I did 101, 103, 104, 105, and 114. So I went there and got my 201, 203, 204, 205, and 214 all at the same time. And then I went back a few years later and did the 206 to do the next level. So that was a week. I did it all back to back to back days. And then for my captain's license, I did I did C school over, I think, 3 or 4 weekends, and took all the tests right there with C school, and then within a month or two had the license in my hand. So a pretty easy process that I think if you were gunning to do it as fast as possible, you can probably get it done in 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
The slow part is waiting on the federal government, Coast Guard, to issue that paperwork for your merchant mariner credential.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Hey, Jeremy, this has been really great. Really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I don't know. It's just cruise the world, go see the sights. Don't be afraid to go out and do it. And there's so many naysayers out there. Just circling back to how we started with how did I get the business? I left a pretty decent career and bought a sailing school without being the best sailing instructor in the world, right? I worked my way into that, wink, wink. But I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. And I did that very intentionally because I didn't want anyone to talk me out of it. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to buy the school. I knew I wanted to leave my 6-figure career. I knew that I wanted to do something different with my life. But if I would have told my family, if I would have told my friends, they'd have been like, whoa, man, that's crazy. What makes you think you're going to be able to make a living as a sailing instructor in Florida with, a gazillion other sailing instructors? So I just let myself do this quietly behind the scenes. And then I popped up and said, hey, guess what? I quit my job. I'm moving to Florida. And then I got you're crazy. That's madness. Why would you do that? And so there's a lot of naysayers out there. Just don't be afraid to do it. That's a little bit of a Nike mantra there, right? Just do it.
It's a good one, because as someone once told me, there's a million reasons not to do something. There's only a few reasons to do something.
Wonderful.
Right?
That's very well put.
So Jeremy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
Really cool interview, Bela. I love Jeremy's story and his approach to sailing and his approach to business. What were your big takeaways?
Well, one thing that's obvious, this guy is enthusiastic about sailing. I mean, the energy just really comes through in my conversation with him. And he's really immersed himself into it, which I think is wonderful. And I really like the way he went about it, right? He sort of started small. And he was trying to figure out, okay, I have this corporate life, but it's not really satisfying me. I'm really into sailing. How can I turn that into a business? He was kind of racking his brain about that kind of stuff. And then, as oftentimes in life, an opportunity presented itself. And I think one of the distinguishing features between entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs is when an opportunity presents itself, an entrepreneur jumps on it. And that's what Jeremy did. He said, hey, the sailing school is for sale. And he bought it. And he really dove into the pool head first. And his whole life revolves around that. And in my conversation with him, man, he seems like a happy, fulfilled guy that really loves what he's doing.
Yeah, totally agree, Bela. And I'm not sure if listeners of this podcast who haven't listened to the other podcast know that you have a deep background in entrepreneurship as a serial founder, as an investor, and as an entrepreneurship professor. So maybe you can put kind of your venture capitalist hat on and analyze the approach Jeremy's taken from a business startup and a growth perspective.
Yeah, I love his approach, right? In other words, once he said, hey, I'm really interested in sailing, he really said, learn. And he went and got a whole bunch of various different certificates and a bunch of education so that he was informed about what he was doing. And interestingly enough, if you're thinking about getting into a particular market or getting into a particular business, if you educate yourself about it by taking courses that business offers, you're going to see the other side of that business as well. You'll experience the consumer side, and you'll get to watch, oh, this is what the instructors do for a living. This is, how they behave. These are the instructors I really like. This is a particular course that I took that went really well. I really liked the way they structured it. I really liked the way they presented the material. I liked the location they were at. So you get to experience some of those things that if you're going to dive into that business, you're gonna value and appreciate what things are important to the customer because you've been the customer. I mean, it's like if you're thinking about opening a restaurant, well, the best thing to do is go work in a restaurant for a while, right? And see what the front of the house looks like, see what the back of the house looks like, and, go to restaurants and experience different restaurants as a customer. So I love that approach about him. The other interesting thing is he sort of opened up a second location. And boy, you could sort of hear it in his voice a little bit. At least I picked up on it. Managing two locations becomes a little bit more of a challenge because if you're used to being a hands-on manager or owner operator, you have two locations, that becomes a little more difficult. And because you can't be at both places. And he has sort of one for the summer, one for the winter. One's in Maine, one's in Florida. So that seasonality part works out really nice. So it's a very seasonal business from that perspective. So it's kind of smart to have a location up north and a location down south. But it also brings in logistics issues, right? He's moving boats back and forth. He's trying to sort through that, et cetera. So I think that's another key thing that I think is really important. And the last one was, I thought it was interesting. He was talking about how customers are getting younger, how when he first got into this business, it was people like you and I who were taking these sailing courses, people getting ready to retire or are retired. They have time on their hands or they're planning for what they're going to do when they retire. And they start taking these sailing courses, they buy a boat. I mean, that's sort of what I did from that perspective. But he said, now customers are getting younger. They're getting more 20 and 30-year-olds who are saying, yeah, this corporate life isn't all that it's cracked up to be. In this country, particularly the United States, in most industries, there's not a lot of value in longevity anymore. In other words, you don't get a corporate pension. So the motivation to stay in a job for 20 or 30 years isn't there anymore like it used to be. So this idea of moving around or taking a year or two or three off all of a sudden becomes much more sort of available, if you will, because you're managing your own retirement funds, you're managing your own 401k, et cetera. So people are checking out for 2 or 3 years and going sailing and sort of satisfying their wanderlust, and then go back to working again. So I think that was an interesting trend as well.
Totally agree. Found an opportunity, recognize it, adapting to trends in the market, and this idea of aligning what you do for a living with what you love to do in life. I mean, what a great story. It seems like a recipe for success. Agreed?
Oh, absolutely, Mike. Go where your heart is, man. As someone once told me a long time ago, they said, no one on their deathbed ever said, gee, I wish I spent more time at work.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. So that has stuck with me for a long time.
Well said. Yeah. Well, neat. Well, what a great guest Jeremy was. And I hope listeners are able to feel the energy and passion that Jeremy shared with you. And just maybe that might motivate some people to launch an entrepreneurial career, or at the very least, if you're interested in the sailing school, reach out to Jeremy, because it sounds like he's got a really cool approach to what he does and does a really great job at it.
Yeah. What do you think, Mike? Time to wrap this one up?
Yeah, let's do it. Listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. We hope that you found our conversation with Jeremy interesting and thought-provoking as we did. As always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and finally, if you enjoy the podcast, hit that follow button on your podcasting app. Help spread the word about the podcast and leave us a review. And if you know of someone that would be a good guest on the show, let us know. Hey, and you know what? Jeremy came in via a recommendation from one of our listeners. So here, Jeremy's a great example of one of our listeners has said, took a course from Jeremy and said, gee, that was really good. I think he'd be a good guest for the show. And he referred him to me, and we connected, and we got an episode, and we got to meet Jeremy. So that's it for today's episode. I hope to see you all out there soon. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. Take care.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.